A very warm welcome from the British Council and the Artex Company webinar, Digital Futures and Alternative Revenue Models, Festival Making in COVID-19, with speakers live and interactive from across India and Sub-Saharan Africa this time. My name is Jonathan Kennedy and I'm the Director Arts India with the British Council. This festival's webinar is part of a monthly series as part of the British Council's Skilling and Capacity Development Programme with India and the UK, Festivals for the Future. Our multi-year programme is aimed primarily for emerging arts festivals and festival managers working alongside established culture festivals and arts leaders. The British Council, as I'm sure you'll know, is the UK's international organisation for cultural relations and educational opportunities. And this is echoed in the ambitions for our festival programme for creative expression, international exchange, and the enterprise economy. To date, we've developed a Festivals Academy, this webinar series, festival programming, India-UK connections through culture grants, festivals digital, and creative economy research around arts and culture festivals. This session and those to come have been designed to respond specifically to the needs of the day, supporting the festivals and creative sector during and beyond COVID-19, with today's focus firmly on digital creation, digital distribution, and digital consumption, and how to leverage new income models for festivals. I've been struck by the number of arts festivals that have gone online in the past few months, in India in particular. JLF with Brave New World, Folklog with its International Storytelling Festival, NH7 Weekender, and Serendipity Arts Festival have all pivoted online to a new space, reaching new audiences in India and worldwide. And we are joined online today by festival leaders, artists, and art consultants in Mumbai, Bangalore, and Delhi, and from a colleague in Johannesburg. They represent the fabulous diversity of festivals and the creative economy, including Anto, co-founder of Under 25. Since starting 7 years ago, the company led the Under 25 Summit, which is India's largest youth festival. And today, Under 25 is India's largest youth community, which primarily focuses on building engaging youth culture for the largest youth population in the world, here in India. Kalpana Nair is Head Programme Coordination of MAMI, Mumbai Film Festival. Kalpana has worked with the Mumbai Academy of Moving Image, MAMI, since 2015. She has Programme Coordination at the festival and has worked for MAMI with STAR to go to film festivals all over the world. Kalpana is also a features writer on film and was selected as one of Screen International's Future Leaders in 2019. And from South Africa, I'm delighted that we are joined by our British Council colleague, Eduardo Cachucho, Programme Manager for Sub-Saharan Africa Arts at the British Council. Eduardo works across various programmes in SSA and the UK on digital art residency, Collab Now, and current online offers for programmes including live streaming in various formats and platforms. He was a lead in developing digital systems for large open calls and has an interest in using the latest technology tools to solve logistical and access issues. In response to the rapidly evolving COVID-19 situation in India and the UK, the health and safety of our audiences, colleagues, partners, and communities is our top priority, which is why we have responded to enable festivals to collaborate online. We understand that this is a really testing time for the creative sector, and festivals in particular face uncertain futures with cancellations, postponements, and rethinking what to do. Nevertheless, we firmly believe that culture connects us, and at this time of uncertainty, creativity and collaboration binds us together. Now at this time, this is more important than ever. So once again, the British Council, Artex, and Art and Culture Resources India reaches out across digital frontiers national boundaries in solidarity with the many inspiring festival leaders in India and beyond. And so with all that said, I'm delighted to hand over once again to Rashmi Dhanwani, founder director of Artex Company, to take the session forward. Rashmi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, and welcome everyone again. Warm welcome to all of you who are coming back to our sessions. As you know, this is, as a topic, in terms of what we're exploring, is pertinent. It was one of the most highest rated topics coming from you as a need that we needed to explore. And it's 3 months down the lines, experiments have been made in the digital space. It was time for us to sort of open this up and understand what do our digital futures look like for the arts. As Jonathan has already mentioned, the 4 themes that we are covering are creation, delivery, consumption, and revenue. And we'll be going in that order. So with that, I'd like to invite our first speaker, Eduardo, who will be presenting on Collabna now. Eduardo, over to you.
Hi, welcome everyone. Really happy to be on this panel. Kalpana and Anto have serious kudos in their projects, quite amazing. So I'm going to share my screen. Do that. There we go. All right. So, I mean, I think we can all kind of acknowledge that we're living in quite a crazy time, and a lot of people, a lot of organizations are having to have been really nimble in the last few months. That does mean that we're often put in positions that are quite scary and mean that, you know, we have to find a lot of ways around what we've been doing for a long time. But in a way, this has also kind of fast forwarded a lot of decisions that probably should have been made longer ago and that should have been actioned. So, I mean, even in the British Council, we've been finding this kind of change quite scary and radical. But I've been trying to keep, sorry, I see I have this flipped around. There we go. I've been trying to keep positive about the changes, because I think that the long-term effects will be really positive for the creative sector. So that's why I've kind of decided to name this Digital Nimble, because I think if we can keep positive about it and also keep a kind of light touch to it and keep experimenting, we'll have better outcomes. I think a really interesting example that launched yesterday in South Africa is our National Arts Festival, which is one of the biggest arts festivals in the world, decided in 2 months before it opened to go completely digital. It's a huge risk. I'm sure they're going to have many fails, but also many wins. They are very seriously going with a pay-only model. And that's going to be very interesting to see how that's going to pan out. And I think to share these experiences would be really interesting after the fact also. But I'm going to go through kind of our experience in Collabna now, which is a kind of 3-year-long project that has developed a lot over the years. And we've also taken this very much as an iterative way of learning. Now, of course, this was pre-COVID-19. So I'm also going to try and frame contextually some of these things in a way that gives a sense of how this could be framed for a kind of COVID context. So just to give you a sense, all of these images that I'm showing come from Collabna now, and that this was a project in collaboration with Fakugezi, the African Digital Innovation Festival in Johannesburg, and Maputo Fast Forward in Maputo, Mozambique. So those were our festival partners for this project. And this project would not be possible without the kind of extreme engagement from both of these festivals. So
Eduardo,
in terms of...
sorry, just to cut in, I'm sharing slides for you since there was an issue with your screen share. If you could look at the Zoom session and let me know when you'd like to advance to the next slide. Thanks.
Great. Next slide then, please. Next slide, yeah. All right, I actually have added, what was the issue with the slides? Could we
Yes, we were seeing a different view from your laptop.
Yeah. Did I reshare again? I realized that it was just flipped on my side. Would
No
that be
problem.
okay?
Yes.
Cool. Sorry about that.
Also, Eduardo, if you could speak up a little bit, I think there's some sound.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
All right, that should be right now. Is that good? You can see the full screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, we can.
And my audio should be better now too. Is that better? Great.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
I think that should be okay. Cool. So in terms of the creation, and this is something that I've really been struggling in this COVID moment, is we're asking a lot of people and a lot of artists to start completely rethinking their way of outputting in a very short amount of time. And this is something that, you know, we've kind of developed over 3 years, learning a lot from things that we did wrong in the first 2 years, and continuously wrapping in learnings into the kind of new years. So I think the really important thing is to give artists context. And I know that's going to be really difficult in this kind of COVID space, but there are ways to kind of bring this across digitally. So the more people can connect, the more we can have people speaking to each other. So one of the things we did with Collab Now, in the first few years, we would bring creatives together for 1 week to first learn to know each other, then collaborate, look at the context and create work in a week. You can imagine it was extremely intense and not the most ideal space for creation. So what we did last year was that we also started focusing on gearing up online meetings before they met, in between. So they had 2 moments where they met each other, one in Johannesburg, one in Maputo. But then we really put effort into connecting people between those meetings and before them. So we had, for example, facilitators whose kind of job it was to make sure that people were touching base, connecting with each other, talking about the projects way before even meeting in person. And I think that in many ways could also be a replacement for meeting people, but that it's really important that there is a mediator, because to also just allow it to happen with the group would be very difficult. So we had 2 mediators who were previous artists from the previous year's residency, who kind of helped guide the artists because they kind of knew what the experience was like the previous year. And then the really important thing was sharing their content. So we spent a lot of time with them. Every person presented their work in a lot of detail to each of the artists. So it allowed them time to understand each other's works and also what the form of the work would require. So, you know, we had video artists and photographers and filmmakers, and each one of those works have a really different requirement and a different way of people being able to create the work and also to output it. So then another thing that was really important was that we didn't kind of think about the digital output at the end, even though this was an in-person event. The in-person exhibition was actually very actively seen as not the most important element of the work. So we were constantly kind of reminding the artists, you know, this event only happens once, and there'll maybe be 200 people at the event, but there's going to be thousands of people, tens of thousands even, that visit the website and that engage with your work in a totally different way. So we really got them to think about how would the audience access the work? How does your concept relate in the digital form? So that's also what we worked a lot with them and with the mentors, was to guide them through saying, okay, but that could work maybe in a real life installation, but when you put that online, there's no context, you don't see any of the other works. How would that work for them? So we really worked with them to try and think of different formats. So a lot of the works had some elements in the exhibition, but then their online version on the website was quite different. And we allowed like a few weeks for the kind of changeover in those works. So they had some more time to develop those differences. And we worked together with them to really create a whole suite of content. So this is our kind of content calendar. And this was, you know, images for Instagram stories, Twitter, GIFs, Facebook content. And so we really put time into kind of working with that content because you want to catch audiences in all different kinds of situations. And then one thing I wanted to maybe just end off is around platforms. And I think this is a really exciting time to kind of practice with different systems. And this connects to the thing about being nimble, is to put together different things, try new programs. I mean, I think the British Council just before COVID had moved over to Microsoft Teams. And that was a really good thing because it's really helped us work in a more nimble way. So we use something called Airtable a lot, Notion. I'll just go through this for our streaming. We use a variety of different things from Streamcast to Crowdcast, Zoom. And you need to understand what those price points are, what do they offer you, what can you get in terms of like financial resource back from that. So yeah, I think my kind of time is up, but I'll leave this. There's this kind of bit.ly link. So a lot of the things I've referenced, I've made a page with different links, so I can share this URL with you. So you can see that later, and that kind of has links to all of the things I've mentioned. So you can also follow up on those things more concretely. Okay.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. That was quite rich. Thanks for that. And some of the things I picked up, which we'll be taking in our Q&A, is about the amount of effort you put into creating and understanding that creation comes from also being relating it to how will the audience experience the work. And that sort of went hand in hand with creation and not as an afterthought. So that was very interesting. Thank you for that. And actually that takes me to our next speaker, Anto Philip from Under 25, because Under 25 Summit, for two reasons. One, of course, is because Anto is dealing with digital natives and how they experience content, cultural content in particular online. How do they navigate through cultural content online? So we went over and asked him about what are the perspectives that you need to consider from the audience's side when you are looking at creating a digital model for your cultural work. Under 25 has also done the Under 25 Pajama Summit, but I won't say much more about it. I'll hand it over to Anto. Over to you, Anto.
Thank you, Rashmi. Thank you so much. I'm super stoked to be here. Firstly, before I start, just want to tell all of you, can I get a hi, please? Can you say hi? Yeah, all of you, every single one of you. Can you say hi? Did you know about that new feature on Zoom where, you know, if you say hi, I get like this emotional, you know, comfort? Thank you. I saw that hi. Thank you. I see that hi, and it's beautiful. Welcome to this session, and I'm super excited because of a few reasons. One is, of course, it's really exciting that yeah, hi. Hey, there you go. There you go. I see the highs. Of course, what I'm really excited about is because British Council is doing something so exciting. There are multiple people that I spoke with before this session about multiple topics, and today it's all coming together to, you know, sort of put it into a 5-minute piece that I want to share with you all, right? And before I start, I want to share a couple of stories and then quickly dive into it, or a couple of disclaimers. Number one is, I may not be right at everything that I say, but this comes from 8 years of experience with dealing around festivals and working with youngsters. So all of this is what I have learned, and I just want to share that learning with you. Number two is, weirdly, for some reason, there is a construction happening outside my house. So if at any given point in time you hear people screaming, that's not me. It's just like people outside. Okay, so please bear with me. In the meantime, I'm just going to take you through my entire presentation. I hope you guys have a great time, and I just want you all to know that, you know, I want to keep it as simple as possible. So here's how I want to start it. Okay, This is what you see on the screen right now. This is the Under 25 Summit in 2019. We were blessed actually because we got to do this summit in February, just before COVID took over. And I still remember in our after movie, I was still saying thanks to the virus gods for letting us sort of have this festival without tension. And we really got through it. And we were kind of happy that it happened before all this, but also at the same time, this is what I want to tell you, right? Running festivals, if you see this picture, there are a lot of people. We have 15,000 people. Just for context, who am I? My name is Anto Philip, and I run this organization called Under 25. The dream of Under 25 was to build youth culture. Now, building youth culture sounds like it's like crazy. Whoa, what is building youth culture? For us, it was very simple. 633 million people are under the age of 25 in our country. That's 50% of our country. This means the world's youngest population is in India. And if I ask anybody out there, what would you say is the biggest asset of an organization, right? If I ask you, what's the biggest asset of Google? You'd say it's its people, the human resource, the people who work for the organization, and the kind of culture that is built within that organization for the people to thrive. Now, when I look at a country like India, we have the most young people in the world. And what are we going to do with that, right? What culture can we build for young people in this country to thrive beyond degrees and certificates? And that's how we started Under 25. Our first stint, of course, was the Under 25 Summit, and it's the most popular thing that Under 25 does. Now, the thing about the Under 25 Summit was when we started it in our first year, we had 80 people attend the Under 25 Summit. From there to 15,000 people attending the Under 25 Summit, it's come a long way, but also at the same time, if you look at the next picture, you clearly understand running festivals. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. And especially when we're running that festival with a crew of 150 young people from different parts of the country who are students who come and volunteer with us or, sort of take part with us as hustlers, or the team that we call as the youngest force in this country that comes together to put the festival together. So this community actually puts the festival together. Me, Sharan, my co-founder, all of us are just like people who are in the process of that, right? We are just helping those people become their best version. Now, the reason why I mentioned this, because while it's crazy and hectic, today I want to share with you 5 things about netizens and festivals. And these are things that I learned, and I want to keep it quick and short. So here we go. And this is just a base to everything that we're going to discuss today, right? So the first thing is, of course, our generation, the generation that I'm part of, is an attention deficit content, has a attention deficit content consumption disorder. Now, what do I mean by attention deficit content consumption disorder? It's basically that we were born into the internet, right? We were born into the internet with that kind of access to information. And every single day with time, as we progressed, we saw a lot more information that we could consume. And this was content, this was presented to us in multiple different ways. There were different platforms that sort of gave us that content. Now, the thing is, just imagine this happening on your TV screen. It would be like you're going to watch every single TV channel for 1 second each, and you're expecting to get some information out of it. That is Instagram, right? We're scrolling one after the other. So we're going through this attention deficit content consumption disorder. We want to know more, but what does this really mean? This means that the entire world, it can be a festival, it can be an artist, it can be a community, it can be a creator, it can be a magician. All of us are working towards the attention of the person, right? Now, attention economy becomes so important in a system like ours. And that is what all of us are out there with our different formats and creations and things that we do. Now, in an extremely competitive environment such as this, an extremely informative environment like this, how do we sustain, and why does somebody feel like, yeah, I feel like this person should be able to spend money on this? Anything, Rashmi? 3 minutes? Okay. See, guys, I'm just like talking nonstop. Rashmi has to come and say, Anto, shut up. Okay, so quickly, the second one, community feeling and belongingness. And this is very important. This is what Under 25 is the base of Under 25 exists on community feeling and belongingness, right? The reason why this is important is in a time like COVID, everything turns back to feeling like you belong somewhere, feeling like you are part of something bigger, right? Out there, when you're creating a festival, if there is no bigger purpose, be it on the internet or offline. People just don't feel like I can be a part of something that is going to be there for me across the different phases of my life, not sad. And that is a community. A community thrives when more people in the community have conversations that are open, right? So the aim of all of us as people, as netizens, as festival creators, is to build that feeling of belongingness, is to listen more than we act. Listening is very important. Third is build connection and shareability. Now think about the instance when you first shared something with anybody, right? Back in the day when you were a kid, you probably shared for the first time with your sibling or with your parents because you had a single point of connection. You were family. Now the importance is, how are you going to build that kind of connection with everything that you see around you, right? How do you build that kind of connection that induces the sense of shareability, right? I'm going in a flight, I'm having my nuts, right? And I see this dude who's sitting on my left. He's wearing a Manchester United jersey. I'm a Manchester United fan. I look at the dude and I say, hey man, you saw that game yesterday. We want to talk about it. And then we start, having that conversation about the match. And immediately my hand is moving with the box of nuts. Be like, hey brother, do you want to take some, right? Why does that happen? We want to share when we see connection. Our aim is to build pieces or build things on digital universes that builds a connection and induces shareability. Fourth one is hyperlocal interactivity. I believe that in a generation like the young India, everything comes back to not just the internet, because there is so much information on the internet. It is also important to be there at a hyper local level, because friends influence more than any influencer in the world. Your own friends, when they buy that headphone, when I bought these headphones, my friends were more inclined to buy these headphones than I would ever do a post on Instagram that would get this headphones to sell. So hyper local interaction is critical. Last but not the least, I will get into the depths of alternative revenue models, but this is the most important point. Matter over medium, right? I don't think that there is anything different that we need to understand in terms of different platforms, right? Each platform has its own style and its own treatment. You can't create a particular ad that goes on a billboard and on radio at the same time. These are both different mediums. Now, the thing about a medium is it is only there to enable your matter. Our job as creators, as curators, as festival experts, or even people who want to build communities, our aim is to focus on the matter. Now, regardless of what the medium is, if the matter is tight and if the storytelling has a setup, a conflict, and a resolution, then people are going to be inclined to what you are saying. And it can be on a digital universe, it can be on an offline universe, it can be even in a hybrid model, just like how Under 25 functions. So for us, we do a festival, we also own a media network, we run a tech brand. All of these coming together truly builds Under 25 as a brand. So the idea is to treat matter over medium. And that's my time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anto. I think there were some really interesting insights that came in, particularly around taking care of every single element and connecting it to the way we would interact in the real life, and not to see digital as a separate realm that we have to unpack in itself, but start from what we know and what we are comfortable with to begin with. So that was quite fascinating. But I also believe that in this, the platform you choose plays a major role. Like, how are you going to get everybody in the same location as you could do in a physical festival? And how do you sort of create that environment for them to engage? So with that, I'd like to bring in our third speaker. Thank you so much again, Anto. I'd like to bring in Kalpana from the MAMI Festival. And here we're going to talk about platforms, about delivery, especially with a film festival like MAMI, where delivery tends to get a little easier because it's still the screen or the visual medium that's your canvas in itself. But also with MAMI in particular, it was interesting to see the adapting that MAMI had to do with COVID-19, and the way MAMI looked at its relationships and strategic partnerships with festivals all over the world to bring or to deliver a different experience for the audience on the platforms that they will be sharing with us. So over to you, Kalpana.
Thank you. I want to start by saying that I've already added 2 events to my calendar. So I'm very happy to be part of this session. And thank you to the British Council team, the Artex team, they've just kind of put together this lovely session in the middle of a pandemic. I wanted to ask Rashmi if this is going to be like the Oscars, where are you going to have music to drown me out if I kind of exceed my time limit? I hope not.
No, we tested music out before earlier on Zoom. It wasn't working, so you may have to listen to my Basara voice.
Thanks, Rashmi. So I'm gonna dive into my presentation here. Right. So I work with MAMI, and this is the yellow circle that defines my life. MAMI is a 22-year-old film institution. It was started by legends like Shyam Benegal and Hrishikesh Mukherjee. MAMI stands for Mumbai Academy of Moving Image. And every year in around October, November, we do the Geo MAMI Mumbai Film Festival, which is like this annual pilgrimage where 25,000 film lovers descend onto Mumbai to watch 220 films over 8 days. So obviously the pandemic did make us recalibrate, but in the last 5 years, what we've done is that along with the festival, which will always remain our focus, we've really looked at what is our year-round program like. So we've created a very strong year-round imprint. And when the lockdown happened, we looked at 3 key things that we could do to kind of slowly amplify the digital part of what we are doing. Also, when it comes to film, of course, there is a lot of romance and charm that is associated with kind of sitting in a dark room with 300 people watching a film. But we don't, I don't think a physical film festival can completely be taken online in the same way. But I think online has its own opportunities, which is what we are trying to do. So let me just dive into the first thing that we launched, which is called Dial M for Films. It comes under our year-round program. These are a series of very exciting conversations with people from the world of film that is curated and moderated by Smriti Kiran, our artistic director. And these are conversations that do not exist anywhere in the world right now with people. Like, for example, these are 6 conversations that we've done so far. So we have a filmmaker like Vasan Bala who's talking to us about what is genre filmmaking. We have an actor like Parvati who's taking us through how she creates each and every character that she does. Shakun Batra, who took us through how does he create rhythm in his films, and Bijoy talking about the intangible chemistry that is collaboration, which is such a large part of filmmaking. And yesterday, Shweta Venkat Matthew, who's like an editor par excellence, took us through how she edits, what is her process, how did she cut Gangs of Wasseypur and many other films. So these are 2 masterclasses that exist, and they are open to everybody. They are attended by 20 people, but we put it out on Facebook and we put it out on YouTube. So it's open to everyone to kind of watch and learn. And it's great for aspiring film professionals, but it's also great if you just love films. The second thing that we launched was we took our year-round program under which we were doing weekly screenings and conversations, and we decided to add an online arm to it because we, as part of MAMI, we show a lot of great movies, and a lot of them which we champion, they never find a home. They don't end up on an OTT platform. They're just not accessible to the public. So the MAMI year-round home theater is our online screening imprint, so to speak. And we've already shown some amazing films like Tanuja Chandra's Auntie Sudha, Auntie Radha, Arun Karthik's Nair, Atul Mongya's Awake, Rhythm Janway's Gold-Laden Sheep and the Sacred Mountain, and the documentary that's moved everyone to tears, which is For Summer. The third collaboration that we were very happy to be part of is We Are One, a global film festival. This is, I think, a truly historic partnership where Tribeca Film Festival and YouTube kind of came together and said that film festivals all over the world need to unite. and we need to support COVID relief, and we also need to show solidarity amongst ourselves. You know, like the international film festival community needs to come together. And MAMI was very happy. I'm very proud to be the only Indian film festival that was part of this amazing, you know, sort of lineup that includes Cannes, it includes Rotterdam Film Festival, really the best film festivals in all over the world. So the 10-day festival was hosted on YouTube. It was open to everybody. It had some great world premieres, some great conversations. Each festival curated their own programming for it. And we were very interested to see how it would pan out, because it's really something that's not been tried as of now. And Smriti had curated 4 films from India that we feel really represents, you know, great emerging talent. These are all first and second time filmmakers. And when we kind of took stock of VR1, we realized that the MAMI films were watched by over 241,000 people on YouTube, which is really the kind of reach that you can never dream of if you were doing a physical festival. And it really provided so much opportunity to these films and so much buzz that in a year where so many festivals have been cancelled and films really don't have that many platforms that they can go to, this was really a collaboration that we were very happy to be part of. Also, the other thing at MAMI is that we never rest on our laurels. So we keep taking stock continuously, and we take feedback at all points of time, good, bad, ugly. And it was amazing to us that the speakers themselves had such a great time being part of these sessions, because they were like, we've never sort of experienced a conversation that is so in-depth and so interested in our process, because it deals with what is usually not visible on screen. From people who were moved to tears from the films that we showed in a good way. And also to a lot of people all across India who just never had the opportunity to come down to Mumbai to catch these films. So for them also, we realized that this is such a blessing that even after the lockdown lifts and, you know, we return back to normalcy, whatever it looks like, we are very convinced that the online arm of this is something that will continue. And yeah, those are the 3 silver linings for us in this very dire situation that we find ourselves in.
Thank you so much, Kalpana. I think that was quite a fantastic presentation for just people to understand how, especially for a film festival, would adapt to the online space and capitalize on your existing assets, which includes relationships and not just, you know, knowledge of platforms. I would like to request both Anto and Eduardo to come back on video so we can begin our discussion. Thank you once again. So while we dive deeper in, as I'd mentioned earlier as well, what we're going to be doing is I'd like to dive deeper into each of the themes that we had right at the very beginning, and we'll round it up with the revenue models. I know someone has asked questions about revenue models. With creation, when we're looking at the online space, and particularly because we've been forced into this space in some sense because of the pandemic, earlier on we were talking about content online can be divided into 3 buckets. One is archival content that you already have and it's very easy to work with. The second is content that's easily translatable online, like a webinar or a workshop. The third is content that you actually have to create afresh, completely. And each of them have different challenges. So I'd like you to sort of respond a little bit around that as we're looking at creation as one major area of thinking about digital models. Anybody could go first. I could call up Eduardo, since you were tackling the content part first.
Yeah, I mean, I think an interesting thing is archive content is usable, but only, I think, I mean, as Anto was mentioning about the kind of attention deficit, is that you then got to be very aware of how people are going to access that information. So if it's a film, they might well watch it in 3 or 4 settings. and not one. And if it's slightly longer things or different types of format, you might need to completely re-edit that information, maybe in smaller chunks, take a small bit onto Instagram so that you're kind of piquing people's interest, because otherwise they also might well never see that content, or also just see that 40-minute discussion and being like, oh, that's not going to be interesting for me, or I don't have time. So what we often do is also just go into all the content and, grab a really interesting 30-second clip and then kind of reshare that and link back to it. So I think that's really important. And that kind of digital first content, it's kind of difficult to tell people, but I think it's really like, it requires a lot of thought, and that it should never be kind of seen as just a simple kind of, a simple pivot. That it actually, the more thought you put into it, also the more engagement you'll tend to get.
Can I quickly take a take that question? Thank you, Eduardo. I think what I was thinking about while Eduardo was talking was, traditionally, if you look at content, so technically content in all ways is first written, right? I mean, you want to write the story down, you want to tell the world what you're thinking about, and you want to, sort of gather those thoughts. And when you look at, the traditional way of reading books, and when books existed the way it did and authors wrote those books, these are technically content pieces. These are technically written content pieces. And they are all information that is packed into a book. Now, what happened when we were growing up, and of course, specifically for me, was books became that thing that if you started, you had to finish, because you're going through that process of wanting to finish the whole book. And then you come to this, sort of internet evolution where we have blogs, right? And what did a blog technically do? A blog would take multiple ideologies from a book and break it down into one long piece, which can be read in the first 10 minutes of your day, where you want to consume a certain piece about time, for example, and we are reading a book about time, you now have a nugget of information, which is coming to you as a blog post. Now, people are consuming that and they realize, oh my God, I don't have to probably read the whole book, but I can get multiple nuggets of information in the topic of my interest from multiple people. Now, that is content consumption. Content consumption has evolved so much in all ways, because now I look at every author as a creator, and every creator is talking about a particular topic. A blog is equal to a blog, and multiple pieces of information and nuggets of information are being given by multiple people to the internet world. Now, the choice of the user or the consumer is to look at the topic at large. So what do I want to learn more about, and how many people do I want to learn about it from? Because I want a varied bunch of information and perspectives for me to come to final conclusion. I don't have to watch an entire webinar, but I just want to come here and understand about alternate revenue models, because I also have other learnings from 3 other people who have also taught me about multiple other things. And that is the future of content consumption. It is topic first, people second. I mean, people play a very critical role, because it is going into an individualistic, voice-based influence. It's not just, hey, a huge community like British Council spoke about it, but also needs individual representation and thought leaders in each of these spaces to come forward and put out those thought processes. And that is what people consume, and they take their best learning and create their own answers to the questions that they have, as opposed to dictating those answers to people. So that's the truest form of content consumption for the newer world.
Thanks. Yeah, please go ahead, Kalpana.
No, I mean, with film, of course, this is the conversation has been going on for so long, about am I going to watch Roma on my phone? Where is the artistry in that? And firstly, everybody who works with film hates the word content, because it's just like, oh God, I'm going to break out into hives. So when you come to films and you look at, okay, obviously when you are going online, you have to let go of some control. And that is true for the filmmaker. He has to make his peace with the fact that ये 25 FPS में शायद बच सकता है. This will be in a smaller thumbnail. Somebody might be watching it in an aspect ratio that they've not kind of considered. And the festival also has lesser control, because you can't really dictate and tell people that you have to watch this film in an entire sitting. But I think the attitude needs to shift, especially because you have to balance that against how many more people are going to experience that content to begin with. You know, so if I show an independent film at MAMI in a theater to 300 people, as opposed to how many more people will have access to that film if I put it online, that's a trade-off for both the filmmaker and the festival to decide. And the other thing is that they are not replacements. We don't really see it as replacements. It's not that, you know, the digital will eat into the theater. They both are very different experiences that are going to survive parallelly. And this conversation of is the screen dead and how will film be consumed, is film dead? Film has been dying for the last, you know, 5 decades, I think, or 6 decades. And so far, I think it's not dead. So I think there is a certain democratization that needs to happen, and those attitudes need to shift across.
And also there's a form of creative destruction here as well, right, to a certain extent. But from what I'm gathering from the three of you is you need to rethink cultural content in the digital space, because you're no longer in control of the environment in its entirety, especially because the remote is not in your hand in some sense, right? And that seems to be one key factor that cultural festival curators and directors need to think about while thinking about digital models, that it's shared power. And if that's the reality, how do you look at the content, don't stone me for it, but the kind of content that we are creating or exhibiting online? But sort of in that direction, I want to ask another question. If you want to control the experience of the audience, and I know that from here we'll move into consumption, what kind of resources would it take in order to do that? And I'll actually throw this to Eduardo, because I know at Faculty you're dealing with these questions, right? You are talking about digital cultural content, and you have been dealing with this for about 5 years. So I'd love to hear from you on this to begin with.
I mean, that's the interesting thing, is I don't think you can push. There's a really limited amount, and it's almost like it's you know, like a sine wave. The more you want to push, the more money you're going to pay, and you're not necessarily even going to get an output that you want. So, I mean, I think like what Anto was saying again was like, people are going to take what they want anyway. So you might as well also think of different ways to format that while keeping, you know, the artist's experience, because that's also important, is what is the artist, I mean, there's different types of formats. So let's say work coming from an artist. So I would say a filmmaker is an artist. So that is an artwork that maintains its own reality. So there is always the actual artwork as the artist wants it. But I think what we spent a lot of time working with those artists with is making them feel more secure about being able to break apart parts of that artwork to make it more accessible to other people also. Because often also then people become very precious about the parts of that artwork. I think the film world's a good example, because a trailer is a good example of how you have to make the film accessible in another format to get people to actually want to watch the thing. And I think in other art forms, that's been really difficult to get people to understand how to do that. Like, how do you do that in visual arts? Or I think music, they intrinsically know how to chop things up. And I think that's one of the reasons why music is so successful financially, is because they've learned over like a century how to break up their works into more accessible pieces. I don't think that totally answered your question, but
it does to a certain extent, and I'm going to bring this up a little more. But what I'd like to do is, you know, just share with you some, as I had mentioned earlier, that we have some insights from some of our earlier sessions. So just to sort of take you through them. So this is some of the insights that have come from some of our earlier sessions. So the pros of creating content online, of course, there are low production costs if you're not going for the third level of content creation that we were talking about. Access is what you did speak about, definitely a slightly more democratic space. and can be more frequent in terms of what you're creating, because all of the other modalities and logistics of operations are cut down. But on the other hand, of course, and Eduardo, you actually brought in that point right at the end, is adaptability. It's perhaps easier for a couple of art forms, but what do you do with theater, or what do you do with dance, and how do those art forms adapt? And the other key concern around creation is also digital skills, the entire literacy that is involved in learning that. So, I'm just going to leave with this last question on creation before we move on. But if there's anything else, we've covered this quite a bit, but if there's anything else that you'd like to share when it comes to creation and production of content online, as a final thought before we move on to, I think some of the audience questions are also there. I'm going to ask my team to give audio access, if possible, to Melissa from Arts Nexus, because she had some critical concerns around consumption, which we'd like to answer live as well. But if you have any final thoughts on this question, if not, we can move on to the next part. Going once? Anto, yeah.
Yeah. So with respect to creation and production of digital content, I feel like, very early on, festivals in general really looked at every festival as an opportunity to create content offline, even before the COVID world. Now, what really gives us an understanding right now is the only thing that technically changes is that you don't have a venue with that kind of a production where you have X number of people sitting in front. You're still going to create the content that you were going to create anyway. Now, the opportunity here, of course, is every con is a new business model. Every con that's written down there is an opportunity for somebody to, sort of go out there and solve that problem if they are passionately solving for it. So for the way under 25 would look at a problem was, how would I run a college fest as under 25 online, right? Now the thing is, there are students who are going to educate themselves. They're going to be, doing their online courses, of course. How do I give them an experience that is much beyond just like, digital festivals, which was to give them an opportunity to now compete at a scale which is global, and of course, celebrate that confusion, right? So for more people to, sort of know more about that. And that's when our already existing work. So here's the first point. The first point is you have to do a lot of groundwork before you get into creating the content, which is our way of telling that, hey, these are the 10 things that we know is definitely a problem that is our opportunity to solve, right? So there is more reason for people to consume it, as opposed to just being like, oh my God, I have to move from an offline festival to a digital festival. Let's go out there and do what makes sense. Instead, let's go back and be like, the digital world is different. What would the digital world want? And in that world, it's very different from the offline world. So we wanted to go out there, and when we do an event, for example, I'm doing an event across 100 campuses, and 1,000 students are going to be a part of it. What are going to be my preliminary rounds? How am I going to select them into the finals? If there are going to be 70 finalists, what's the waiting room experience? What is the experience with the judges? How are they going to be announced on the internet? What is a different way of sort of giving them a much more larger audience than what they would have had at a college fest otherwise? So now we've turned the game. It's better to do something on the internet as opposed to doing that offline. And once a year, when you have a congregation of those many young minds, the B2B industry is going to look at it and be like, oh my God, this is where I can see as an opportunity to hire the next set of talent. There's also a place where I can see that these are the kind of talented, skilled young people, because I'm going to run a design competition to find the next set of people who can design my sneakers. I'm Puma, and I want them on board, right? So the kind of things that content can now solve for is also solution driven for a B2B audience, also extremely powerful for a college audience who didn't have that kind of access at a college fest, and I think that's what's critical.
Yeah, thank you. And, again, I'm going to ask the team to share this on your chat window for the audience. Is an excellent example of exactly what you're talking about is National Theatre Live, which is that third category of content where an enormous amount of resources were invested in order to create a digital experience and access for, plays of National Theatre, who otherwise people from across the world would not have been able to have access. The reason, there's a reason, audience, I'm sorry that we are pushing a revenue question right till the end, because unless you're able to resolve these questions, we're not going to be able to come to the revenue question. It's very easy to say that ticketing is a model of revenue, but if your costs are going to be high, how do you arrive at what the right model is? Yes, Eduardo.
And I think something that's interesting about that National Theatre example is that doing those recordings actually resulted in the theatre industry having more income because people wanted to go to the theatre more. And I think also now that it's been live, they haven't released information, but I'm pretty sure they're probably making more money than they ever did selling National Theatre Live in cinemas, which I know in South Africa were almost always empty or kind of sponsored events. So I think those things are very carefully linked in a way. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. I just want to check with the team. Do we have Melissa on audio? Is it possible for her to answer her question?
Hello, Rashmi. Can you hear me?
We can, Melissa. Please go ahead.
Look, thank you, Rashmi, and the team at Art Exco for this great conversation. You know, we are at the Cairns Tropical Writers Festival that I'm part of, discussing how to internationalize our audience, but somehow combine the online audience with the live audience so that you can replicate that community, the relationship building that happens by chance at a festival site. You know, when you're standing in a queue or sitting beside each other waiting for the next speaker. So we want to know how to preserve the community building of the audience experience.
So just to sort of reiterate her question, I hope you got it, but otherwise it's in the Q&A box as well. Please go ahead, Kalpana.
No, I couldn't catch all of her question because the audio was a little low. So I'm just trying to.
Yeah, I think it was basically, can we replace the connectivity that comes from audiences meeting each other? So like, how can a digital experience match the experience of what we feel offline because it has human connection? And Kalpana, if you're okay with it, I'll just quickly go ahead and then you can, add on. So, thank you so much, Melissa, for that question. Of course, what really excites me about this question is there need not be, the exact same experience replicated on the internet. So we need to treat these two things as two different experiences. Now, a digital experience can never be an offline experience, can never be matched to a festival where I actually meet somebody. Now, but what does a digital experience have that a festival offline cannot have is a bunch of things, right? The frequency, the number of times that you can interact with the people, the questions that you can ask, the visibility of the number of people who are attending it is also a lot more than 15,000 people sitting. Just to give an example, for example, with Under 25, we did something called the Under 25 Summit, which was the pajama edition, which was for people to sit at home at the comfort of home. The way we direct people to have their own experience is more individualistic than with around people, right? So when I'm curating for the big festival, which is 15,000 people in real life, the communication is very different. I'm going to tell them to come with mismatched clothing, become, representation of their own identity. We're going to be talking about how do you stand in the queue, what song are you going to listen to when you enter. But when I'm talking about a digital festival, I'm going to tell them, you know what? I want you to wear your most comfortable clothes. I want you to sit down in front of your big screen. If you have a TV at home, switch on that TV. I want you to pick up a bunch of snacks that you really love. Get your favorite drink. If it's coffee, bring that onto the table, sit down, relax, and now consume a story that we want to tell you, right? And that story is consumed like it's personal. It's for me. It's coming to my home. It's in my screen. It is me who is attending that event, right? So it is a lot more personal, where on the flip side of an offline festival, it's a lot more driven towards interaction. So the good part about platforms like Zoom and of course like all of these live streaming partners is they kind of replicate that in a very, very small way. But is that the best way to do it? I would say that's a way to only get from point A to point B, which is to solve the problem. By the end of it, if we learn how to manage our festival with an alternate revenue model through this session, we win, right? More than anything else. And I think that's the aim of every experience that comes on the internet, to get the content, get the information across in the most easy way for consumption, also at the same time in the most conducive way at the comfort of your home. And I think that didn't happen when you had to get out, wear your clothes, go into the city with Bangalore traffic and get to the place to finally experience that festival. So both has its own sides, and we have to take it for what it's worth on the positives of both sides.
So then can I problematize the word replicating? Because I think that's what's becoming a concern. People feel that digital is the only space that's going to remain. And that I think is a challenge because as you very rightly said, can you actually replicate? Can we problematize the word and perhaps come up with a different way of thinking about experience or consumption in an online space that's not replicating the live?
Yeah, we shouldn't.
Sorry, I was just, see, you can't replicate, okay, so you watch a film, or let's say you participate in a conversation, there is so at a brass tack level, there are two things that online is great for. One is talent availability is a huge issue when you're doing physical events, right? Like I'm sure Anto and Eduardo know that just juggling calendars and getting 15 people in a room together is an issue. So when you do when you are using something, when you're doing something online, that gets slightly easier. You can put together combinations of people, their schedules are slightly freer and all of that, that's easy. But just to give an example of something that MAMI did at Dial M for Films, like yesterday we did a session with Shweta Venkat Matthew, and it was live on Facebook, and I had at least 200 comments that were coming in while that session was going on, that Smriti was able to take and direct to the person who was doing that conversation. Some of them were people from the film industry, some of them were studying at FTI, but that level of interactivity I have not seen even in a live session, because typically it's 20 minutes, people talk and you take 5 Q&A questions. So there are, I think, very interesting ways where that interactivity can come in. It might not replicate like you're saying. And also the thing is that when people who attend MAMI they're actually sort of, MAMI is a shared community that spans the length and breadth of India, like in the sense that it's, it is a pilgrimage, like, and when people from all over the country are able to watch a film at MAMI, there is that shared community that gets made online at that point. You don't really need to be physically standing in a line for that community to create. So I see lots of comments on Twitter, people saying, have you checked this out? And there is a lot of community creation that is happening even during the lockdown. So it's not like that is something that cannot be done under the circumstances that we have.
Okay. So perhaps what we're drawing from you is that it's a different experience. Let's not look at replicating, let's value it for the strengths that it has, but also hope that we'll get back to live very soon, but also learn from this and see what other models can we add to our ways of working. With that, I want to move to this slide on consumption, and I have a specific question. So now that we know that the digital space is different, people interact, your audience is interacting differently with your work online. How the pros and cons are for the rest of you to see the audience, but the question that I have for you is, how do you market to this audience?
Okay, I'm gonna take that very quickly. I briefly covered this in my session. It primarily comes down to one thing, right? Like, I personally believe in terms of marketing, and if we want people to spend money on something, we're in the same. So when it comes to the digital world, there is no boundary, and there is literally nobody saying that this is the one thing that you have to have in your life, or this is something that you don't need in your life. It's all coming back to what you think you want to spend your money on, right? Now, for a country like India, we need to understand this. Ticketing has never been the biggest revenue stream for any festival, right? Ticketing exists, and we are still evolving to get to a place where people are going to spend that kind of money on live experiences. And at the same time, now coming back to digital, we were born into the digital world when the geo revolution happened to consume everything freely. Now, this creates a certain amount of a problem, because marketing really now needs to go into the aspect of what exactly are people paying for. Now, I believe the single most important thing that we need to tell a consumer, if you want them to spend money, and if it's marketing to just attend this with respect to people buying tickets, or even just attending it for the sake of attending it, is to sell them what they're buying. Tell them, I call this, what I call this is the content job. What is the job of your content? What is it trying to solve, right? I believe that, you know, a Domino's pizza is not the best pizza in the world, but they marketed it as the fastest pizza you can get to your home, right? Now, if we wanted the best pizza in the world, we would go to, I don't know, a gazillion other Italian places that we probably love. And if our need was the best pizza, then we would go for that. But the minute you think of Domino's, you're thinking about convenience, you're thinking about 30 minutes, you're thinking about the pizza that's going to come to your home for your house party, right? How did that happen? It's the content job. The job of your content is to, or your marketing content is to tell them why they have to do this, why this is your go-to choice. So in the category of the fastest pizza, Domino's won. But in the category of the best pizza, did Domino's win? No, that's not what they wanted, right? Now, there are multiple examples like this where your content job really makes the difference. I want to sell, you know, a drill that is going to drill a certain screw into the wall. I don't want to sell the drill the way it is. I want to talk about the beautiful frame that you can fix on your wall because of this drill, and that's why you need this drill. That is marketing, right? Tell them, sell them what they're buying, right? They're buying a great looking ball, they're buying a great looking experience, they're buying a great looking home. And who's going to help you do that? This drilling machine, right? That's marketing. And I feel like that's what we need to do with every experience, regardless of digital, which is on the internet or off the internet. It's the same.
Thank you, Anto. Eduardo, would you like to venture a response?
Yeah, and I think maybe some of the things that you were putting on that slide was a kind of clue, because, you know, you're talking about the amount, the population, the sheer amount. And I think, I mean, I'll maybe just mention something quite anecdotal of, like, I'm part of an improvisational group in Johannesburg, and we've always had real life events in Johannesburg, in a part of town that's a little bit difficult to get to. And as COVID started, we started doing online rehearsals, and we did our kind of first sessions of digital theater, like online improvisation. And one of the things that we were very aware of was that, A, the thing wasn't rock solid. So we were really experimenting, which I think is something I want to mention also about, like, experiment as much as you can. And I think to be very careful to charge people if you can't guarantee you're going to have exactly. So I guess it's also what Anto is saying is, like, if you're telling someone what they're buying and they buy it, and then you're not giving them what they're buying, which I know is something that's happening quite a lot in South Africa, at least. A lot of musicians were doing live events, and then halfway through the event, the whole thing shuts down. It's no longer able to go back up. People got really angry. So in that kind of frame, we also said, okay, we're not making people, we're not charging people. It's totally open to anyone. It's open to donations. And actually, we just asked for donations at the end and some way between. Those events have made more money than any live event ever made, sometimes in combination, you know, many events combined. And I think they, you know, when you have a larger audience, you can also risk to bring in less money per person, or much less. You only need a small percentage to pay for the thing. And since it's a global audience, or could be, if you're getting in pounds, one person's pounds ticket could cover, you know, 20 other people. So I think that's also something to think about. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you for that, Eduardo. I'm going to move on to the next slide, but I'd like the team to just have Mona Ambegaonkar on standby. She's asked a question around folk artists, which I wanted to bring up. But while the team is able to do that, you know, we'll just have a quick conversation on distribution before we move on to revenue. But this is, you know, we've spoken about platforms, and depending on what platforms you use, how easy it is then for you to be able to have that kind of interactivity. So my question to you is, what should a festival manager or a director consider while choosing a platform for their content? If you could also, recommend a couple of platforms. I know that Eduardo, in your presentation you had, and we've already shared that link with the team, because this is also a question in particular, Kalpana, for you, that has come from South Africa, from Melissa. What technology platforms do you use in your home theater program? She's from the NBO Film Festival in Kenya.
Yeah, I can take that. I saw that question. See, for us, because the films that we are showing are brand new, we are very, very, very careful, and security is a huge concern. So we are still experimenting with a lot of different platforms, but there are a lot of platforms that are available. Like there's Festival Scope and Senando, which is what Senando is what Cannes is using to kind of go online as we speak. Today is the last day of the Cannes market. I was supposed to be in the French Riviera, but here I am. So, so when we, so far the screenings that we have done on home theater, we have, it's a very basic tech that we are doing right now. We are looking at other options, but we use a Google Drive that has only a email sign-in possible, so that the link cannot be transferred, it cannot be shared, it cannot be captured. So a lot of those considerations kind of come in, which is why we've been very, very careful about experimenting with platforms. But Festival Scope and Senando are two platforms that are available for film festivals that are looking to kind of go online.
Any other recommendations that you have for selecting platforms? I know you've mentioned security. Anything from you, Anto?
Yeah, just want to quickly add. For me, I think when I look at choosing a platform, always look at where my audience is and where do they already spend a lot of time, and that's extremely critical for any platform to choose. I feel like that should be a bottom line when it comes to choosing a platform. Just to focus on, I'm looking at it, building a community which is young. I'm talking about under 25. My go-to research would be to sort of find out where are they spending the maximum amount of time. And I would narrow that down to, oh my God, these are the 4 platforms that is now taking X amount of time of a youngster in a day. And if I enter that platform with a valuable offering, how much of them are going to give me that attention, and what would I do with that attention? How much can I monetize on that attention, right? Why is that attention important? So we're an Instagram native platform. We were Instagram first since I think 4 years. We started doing, the modern way of Instagram takeovers. We were, I think, possibly some of the first ones to do in the country 3 years back. And for us, when the lockdown sort of really happened, and when we were told that the festivals cannot really happen as much as we wanted to, we were in fact embracing it because we already knew what it took to sort of have conversations on the internet. By that time, we were running 100 pages. We had a community of over 2.5 million people. We were already interacting with them, right? So I feel like we ended up, being digital natives by the virtue of being young, because we had to be there. And we lucked out on the platform giving us that kind of, audience time, because youngsters were just we are an instant gratification generation. We are already addicted to the internet, and we really want validation. So our aim was to figure out how can we be responsible and take some of that time to sort of impact their mind in the positive way, as opposed to sledging, perpetuating hate, going into the negative side of the internet. And what could we do to sort of add value to the people that we represent?
So it's also, as you said, where's your audience and how do you interact with them, and what's their literacy with the platform? As a flip to the question, I think there was another question from Roshni Kumar, who's talking about, with a live festival production head, they may not have experience to produce a digital experience online. And how do you bridge this gap? And I think that's a very important thing, right? Because we're talking about platforms, but even for us, when we moved to webinars, we were again one of the first people to have moved to webinars with the Festival Connections 3 months ago. We had to learn completely how to do the right kind of webinar. And the learning is incredibly high and constant. And it's a challenge. So I'd like to sort of, for you to respond to the literacy from the festival team's perspective, and then we can bring in Mona for her question around how do folk artists adapt to this kind of literacy as well, if they have to think of performing or, having a creating a platform for themselves online.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this as an opportunity just in a very simple way, right? If not today, if not for COVID, we still would have had to do it at some point in time, right? Because this is the first time in the world that the world is extremely connected, yet disconnected at the same time, right? There is a lot of opportunity on the internet that was just waiting to explode. It's not like Zoom didn't exist before the lockdown. It just got more popular after the lockdown. It's not like live streaming wasn't a concept before the lockdown. Twitch existed as a platform. Gamers always did it. It's just that we got to know about it a little later because of the use case and having to. So I feel like everything that comes like this, we're going through a biological war, right? And this war is going to give us a certain amount of learning that we can never go back from, because now the pandemic, the education system didn't fail during the pandemic. The pandemic showed how flawed the education system was during the pandemic. So I think what we understand from these learnings is that regardless of this happening or not, it's time for us to upskill ourselves, right? To any possible way or medium. As festival creators, curators, our job is to make sure that we know every new tool that is being given to us as an opportunity to connect with our audience in a newer format. Now, we shouldn't shy away from something like that. And I feel like every person has equal amount of access on the internet to learn the same things. So if somebody is doing it, you can do it too. It's your choice if you want to learn and upskill yourself. Now, get on the bandwagon and make the most of it.
And it's not like it's an option anymore. It's not like I can use Zoom without understanding that Zoom can also allow bots to come in. So it becomes a matter of security. Kalpana, you were saying something.
See, in the sense of, I feel that there's no one course that you can do to kind of become like, digital savvy. I think DIY culture is fairly low in India because we have inherently or mostly we have organizations that are very hierarchical and, they kind of keep delegating the tech part of it to, other people. And this is a great opportunity to kind of embrace it and figure yourself out and make 50 mistakes on Zoom and, kind of understand what is it that is required. And it's been a learning curve, and it's, MAMI is a very young team. So invariably I'm turning to, people and asking them, what is Snapchat? Ye kya hai? What is, this? And, they kind of say like Fleet, we have to now deal with Fleet, and every day there's something else. So, but I think nobody can kind of just sit and say that, only Christopher Nolan has the luxury of saying that I don't use email, and it should stay that way. Everybody else should use email and WhatsApp and Zoom and whatever else is available to kind of move the piece forward. And that's the only way to do it, to learn by doing.
Thank you. And Mona, before we give you the mic, I'm going to move on to have an eye out on the time. I'm going to move on to the last theme that we're exploring. Drum roll for revenue. We've got a bajillion questions on revenue, so I'm hoping to sort of pick some of them up right now. So I just want to sort of give you, before we could ask essentialist questions about how do you generate revenue online, here it is. This is how you look at revenue online. These are the different ways in which you can look at revenue online. And my question to you then is, sorry about that, these are some broad questions that I had, but I'm going to pick up questions from the audience as well. Is that if these are the models that we are talking about, subscribership, membership, pay-per-view, donation, Eduardo, you mentioned that excellent example of how the possibilities are there online, ticketing being another way, collaborative projects and relicensing in that sense, ads and sponsorship, of course, rentals. But there is a sense that online, because of the experience, that your ticket revenue or your value may be perceived as low. So there is the broader concern there, but I just wanted to put these as responses to people asking about what kind of models are there online. Much of this is available. I think our time would be better spent on answering these questions, which I would like you to look at and start. So if you could first begin with, is there anything else that we may be missing in these models? We can start with you, Eduardo, if you wish.
Yeah, these are the hard questions. I mean, I work at the British Council, so we often have funding for projects, but I mean, you know, just from watching a festival like Fakugezi growing over the years, I think, again, as kind of Anto was mentioning, that you've kind of got to prove what you're worth in a way. And I think with digital, it should be seen almost as that additional revenue stream that is coming in addition, and that it should be seen in conjunction with physical things. And I know that's not a kind of easy answer in a moment where everything feels so locked down. But I think the more open it is, the more people are going to be willing to take a chance, because I think that's also a problem now in this transitionary period, is that I think we can also be quite honest. I think, like also what Kalpana was saying about experimenting, like we should be also honest with the audiences about the experimentation. And the more honest you are, then also the more willing people will be to go along with it. Like, for example, I think it's going to be really unlikely you're going to get subscribers in a moment like now. People don't necessarily have jobs. People are not going to subscribe to an experiment. Like, things need to be really solid and needs to be a really good case for anyone to subscribe to anything, most likely only your cell phone, if even. So I think these are very hard questions. I would say what I've been seeing is a donation model. I think it's going to be very interesting to see the National Arts Festival in South Africa, who has taken a very hard stance on the fact that they are looking at for pay festival. I mean, you have to pay to see things. So I think to check in a week when their festival is finished and see how that's gone would be a very interesting test case. Yeah, I think Mona, I think you were going to speak.
Mona, you have a question that you could ask in relation to revenue models?
Because I am a practicing theater person, I also work in television and cinema, and I'm doing something online as well for Netflix, for a streaming platform, and everything has come to a grinding halt, really. And what was just now very correctly pointed out, most people don't have jobs. They have nothing coming in for the last 3 months. And so I don't see how digital platforms are going to create revenue models for independent practitioners. And also, when you're talking about, I have all these young people around me in MAMI, who know the word of the meaning of fleeting, and they do all this. But how does someone who is from the rural areas of India, where a lot of our art resides, how are they going to learn this new language? What do we do? How does a digital festival, reach out to someone like them and also empower them, so that they are not lost in this whole flood of technology that is coming at us because of the pandemic, and then from this point onwards, etc.
Thank you, Mona. I think that's a very, very important question. Is while thinking about revenue and looking at the opportunities that the digital world currently also represents, how do we include the others who may not be able to come along with us as easily? It sort of departs a little bit from the revenue concern, but I think it sort of adds to it, right? Because these are the missed opportunities, and these are our assets in some sense. So how would you include the margins in some sense while building a revenue model?
So I feel like, this is such a beautiful question, because of course we need to talk about everyone as opposed to just people who have the access to these kind of tools. But, what data shows is that, in a country like India, for example, I'm so sorry. In a country like India, when we look at the biggest people on the internet in terms of the number of followers or in terms of the number of people who are following them, it is not that it is coming from people that are from privileged backgrounds. It's across India. We've seen a digital revolution where the access to something like the internet or even a smartphone is now at par for the entire country to have an access to something like that, except for, of course, a part of this nation who does not have access. but just generally the digital natives are not just the privileged urban millennials. It's also so many more youngsters, because now we operate in 44 cities around the country, and I've spent so much time with tier 3 colleges, and I've come to understand that, of course, the education that they have, because of YouTube. Of course, if you look at Amit Badana, Carrie Minati, Bhuvan Bam, mostly Sane, all of their followers come from pan India, and their audiences are not just from a certain place. Of course, they cannot spend the money. So what then happens? Of course, what are we doing with these kind of voices that we have in our country, to spread and use their platforms and use their voices to reach out to the masses? Of course, as festivals, we have the access to curate. And when we curate, we need to keep in mind who we are curating, so that we have a diaspora of audiences who are consuming it, as opposed to the people that we know and we have access to. And one of the things that I learned during curation was, we don't really curate beyond what we know, because that's our point of view. And only recently, I think a couple of years back, when we were sitting down on a review meeting, we said, it's more on the outside. The other people who are consuming our content should be telling us what they're feeling, as opposed to what we are feeling, because we don't want to force fit an ideology into an audience. Instead, the ideology is built by the audience, and we become the custodians to put that message out for them. So I think that plays a very, very critical role.
Thank you. Kalpana, please.
So I think the question is very, very valid, and I feel that at a basic level, there is a large part of India that will not, if I speak about MAMI, that obviously, like, it's not like they will be able to plug in at the moment that we are at, because there is no institutional support that has been created to open up access to them. But as a festival, I think our primary responsibility is also to kind of look at inclusion at a wider lens, and really kind of go about curating stories and films that are from all corners of India, giving them a platform, ensuring that at least the people who are attending MAMI will get a window into, a language like Gadi, which is what Gold Laden Sheep is on. It's, like a dialect that they would have never had access to. So, inclusion can be built in at that level also, where you can go around seeking stories that are very inclusive in terms of gender, in terms of culture, in terms of dialect. We try our level best. We are a non-profit organization. We make 2 of our venues during the festival are absolutely free for students. We really want to reach out to as many people as possible. But beyond a point, the resources will stop us from kind of physically going into every corner of India. And so baby steps, I guess. I mean, we started off as a festival that 3,000 people were attending. It's now 25,000 people, and they span demographically all across. We are not an expensive festival to attend, and we're very democratic and egalitarian in that sense. So, and we do what we can, basically.
And then another 1 million online.
Yes.
So I think that's the other key differentiator, right? When we're talking about digital revenue models, to understand that input costs becomes a big thing. Like, what are your input costs? The second thing, as you also mentioned, both of you have mentioned, is scale and the possibilities of looking at revenues in ways that you wouldn't have imagined. Eduardo gave that fantastic example of the donation concept, and it's also placing it at the right time. So if you have an online show, when are you giving the donate button? So the strategies for driving revenue into your, your presentation could also be another way of looking at it. But I have one final question, one final comment, and then one final question before we close, is what you also mentioned is that we have our folk heritage, and the artists from across the country is our assets. And if we combine that level of scale of art we have with the scale of audience that we could manage, it can create some very fantastic revenue models which we otherwise would not have also thought of. So just to a thought to festival directors, curators here, to think about content in a much more broad-based way as well. So that was one point. But my one question, just to make this bit a little more tangible as well, how do you look at benchmarks of ticketings and slab, especially in this time? Like for us, if it's a panel discussion, we start with as low as 100 rupees, because we know that otherwise this would have been free, but it means that people actually turn up for the session. If it's a workshop, depending on how many hours the workshop leader is spending, we will price it accordingly. So how are you taking decisions while pricing tickets, or is that something that you feel is still too new for you to explore in this space? Eduardo, shall we begin? Sorry, go ahead, Anto.
Yeah, I'm just gonna add one bit because I'm sure like the others have more things to add. But the one part that I wanted to add was in terms of specifically revenue models that is going to be critical. We work on, I mean, just generally, traditionally, a lot of ticketing is based on one event and one particular experience that you pay for, and that's the end of that experience, right? That's what I call a short-term, barely any gain kind of a focused revenue stream, right? Like it's just for that moment. The opportunity that we have with a digital revolution in the festival business is to have a long-term action-driven ticketing strategy, right? So then you're gonna point number one is focus on identities and what's the problem that you're solving for that identity. For example, I'm looking at a college student. Am I gonna give them X number of activities and things that they can do to or enable themselves with enough qualities to graduate and find a job with a job market that I can create for them by the end of this experience, which is going to be planned across 8 months with a ticketing strategy of an overall 8 months with a direct solution by the end of it, right? Now, there is long-term actionable solution to the money that you're paying. And that kind of an experience at scale, if I mean, what I'm looking at is how can I get like 10,000 students to go through an experience like this? That's when I think it's critical for all of us internally also to figure out how much of a tech infrastructure do we need to scale our own business model. So hence, I mean, of course, I'm just speaking from our experience. 125 launched tech 1 year back. We're building our own internal tools to sort of scale the solutions that we want to scale. Because not everybody in the world is building for you. Sometimes every problem is your employment. So we go out there and use that as an opportunity to employ ourselves.
Eduardo.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's it's a difficult question to answer. I mean, it comes back to this kind of the issue of access. So resources, I think, is a real issue, but I mean, festivals, I think, are already under such a difficult, in such a difficult position. You can't solve everything. It's impossible. And I think a lot of the answers for that is governments need to get involved. Like a festival cannot be responsible for giving access to all of their content to every person in a country that maybe sometimes doesn't even have enough food to eat. And I think that we need to be very clear about who's responsible for that. The festival is not responsible for that. I mean, as Kalpana was saying, you can have a theater space that's open for people to come in for free. Whether they can even get there is another matter, but that's not the festival's ultimate responsibility. And I think, again, I would just say that experimentation is the key. Try different formats. Try a donation format, then try paying a really low fee as the minimum entry, but giving people options, and then weigh out the outcome at the end. Because I think people are also very scared to try things, and then they also feel, oh, if we donate, then it means what we're doing is worthless and no one will pay. But if you don't try, you're going to have zero data, and you actually need the data to be able to make a real analysis of what you're doing. So that would be my answer. I don't think there's a concrete way, especially in this time. Yeah.
Thank you. Kalpana, any final words from you on this?
So we've experimented with a few models. MAMI is a non-profit organization, and we run on sponsorship because it is legacy building. It is a long vision of what a film festival is going to do to a city and to a country. You need to find partners who share that vision. There's no immediate ROI at all, in ways that you can map and measure, unfortunately. But a few things that we have tried is like, for example, with VR1, that was a donation model. Everybody who plugged in to watch that film was watching it for free and they could donate. So we were able to fundraise for COVID in that sense. For the MAMI year-round program, home theater, we've kept the option open to filmmakers. If they want to charge for their film, we just kind of set it up for them and the money goes straight to the filmmakers. We just want to empower them because often these films don't have any sort of, even pay-per-view is not an option because they're not on an OTT, there's no platform that will do it for them. And you know, any sort of theatrical is months away, years away, probably not going to happen. So we were very transparent and everything that's paid goes straight to the filmmaker. There's nothing that we make out of it. So it is very much a non-profit where even what we charge to attend MAMI is 500 rupees, you know, for a week of unlimited films. It's not enough to kind of take on the cost of doing the festival. So it is largely, it remains sponsorship for us.
Thanks a lot. So if I'm just recapping on the content front, there are different kinds of content. Be aware of what kind of content you're going online with. Do not divorce it from consumption, from experience. Think about how your audience is interacting online, where do they lie, and how are they engaging with you, your work, and otherwise online, and be mindful of that while thinking about creation or curation in that space. When it came to platforms, there are a lot of options, but that cannot preclude your own literacy as a festival manager, as a festival creator and a curator, because if you don't have the literacy, it'll be very difficult to have, you may have all kinds of platforms, but they all have challenges. If you do have resources, you can actually design your own solutions. For bigger festivals, that does become, you know, an easier way to work with. For smaller festivals, that may be a challenge, but literacy is the way, and upskilling is the way to go. And finally, also to be mindful of the fact that while you're building this new world, take everybody along with you. And that as a value system, but also as a way to rethink how do you stand out in all of the free content that's available online, all of the opportunities that are available online for everyone. And in this noise, how do you stand out? How do you work with everyone with you, take them along to create a unique voice? In terms of revenue, I think we've already mentioned a lot of possibilities of looking at revenue models. But a key thing here that Eduardo mentioned was experimentation. Experiment, see what's working for you. What we haven't strongly covered in this session is data and analytics, and how do you use that data to inform your decisions. But that there was a hint that Eduardo did present that when you're looking at, if you don't experiment, you don't get the data. And if you don't get the data, how do you figure out what's working for you? And the digital space allows us to do that much more than the physical space. So these are some of the possibilities that you have, along with the fact that unlike a physical space, there is a limited time and experience. In a digital space, different models can be designed, including a long-term action-driven ticketing strategy. A lot of amazing buzzwords that I've taken from Anto's bit, which I'm going to compile and share later. So thank you for that. And I think finally, it's just to sort of reiterate and let all of the audience members know that this is not an attempt to replicate live into the digital space. To take some of the learnings for sure, but not to replicate. At the same time, to think of the digital space as a new concept, a new context, perhaps dipping into your existing knowledge base to build this new world for you, and how to take this world along with you as you go back into the live world. And I think if you're sort of able to take that away, you'll be able to breathe a little easy. So with that, I'd like to sort of share our final screen and hand it over to Jonathan for a formal thank you. So our next session is on health, safety, and social distancing at festivals. We would be looking at how do you look at thinking about creating a live festival even in these times, and what do you do to prepare, because people are saying things are going to be opening up end of the year, early next year, whatever those moving timelines might be. So this is what we're going to be discussing in the next session. And I know that some of you had trouble logging in today. Please, next time when you're RSVPing, look out for our emails with a Zoom link in your inbox. We are not going to be sharing public Zoom links. It's privacy concerns. If you need to attend our sessions, you have to check out for your Zoom links in your inbox. Otherwise, you can catch us on FB Live. Over to Jonathan.
Thank you, Rashmi, and thank you for a fabulous session again. I'm not going to do any summarizing because you've just done it so brilliantly, Rashmi, in terms of the richness and the detail of what was described over the course of the last hour and a half. So we look forward to the next session. And thank you, Anto. Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you, Kalpana. Thank you, the Artex team. Thank to all of the back office team and the British Council who've been keeping us all on track. And thank you, Rashmi, and back to you.
Thanks, Jonathan. A big thank you again to our speakers and our audience for joining us. Please send in feedback. My team's going to share a feedback link in your chat box and also share the feedback link in your email. There's a poll that's been put up as well. The poll is now closed, so we'll be sharing results soon. We just wanted your inputs on what sessions to be designed going forward. Thank you once again. Have a good weekend ahead.
Thanks, Rashmi. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rashmi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rashmi. Thank you, Kalpana. Thank you,
Everyone.
Eduardo.
Thank you, Kalpana.
Bye.
Amazing.